Alright everyone, it's time for the Occult, video number 309. Most medicine is transitory pseudoscience. Yes, this includes the false consensus of science sort of thing. There have been times in medical science especially, and this definitely segues into other types of science, but we'll try to keep it focused. Me keep it focused? Might be a losing proposition, but I can at least make an attempt. I get a gold star for effort. Within medical science, if we look at the history of medicine, most often it's the history of things that failed and didn't work, but were regarded as working fine at the time. Placebo effect is common. You've got, electroshock and leeches and all these things. I think the most technically pseudoscientific science of all is nutritional science. There are some basic premises there that we understand to be objectively true. They've been known for a long time. We can verify them. A lot of it, though, is just theory and fad dieting. The same is true with a lot of other variants of medicine. Homeopathy, at once, the idea of microdosing things, was widely accepted in its era. It was supplanted later on. Homeopaths sort of take off on the Thomsonians and say, well, yeah, but you're just giving people too much of the medicine. Why don't we give as little as possible in minute quantities and possibly over time? Sort of like, hey, I'm going to build up resistance to this poison by drinking very small, sub-damaging portions of it over time and build up resistance. So, or you could say, hey, I'm going to shoot myself with smaller bullets to build up a resistance against the big guys. And, of course, that is hit or miss as to whether it works. It depends on what you're actually doing. Depends on the poison. Of course, the dose makes the poison, etc. Dietary science, though, I think is the most interesting one because, and I always point this out, like eggs, when I was a kid, were considered to be demonic because they're full of cholesterol. Later on, we realized the cholesterol link is technically tangential, and actually eggs are just a good source of protein. Salt was the devil until recently, and now sugar's the devil. Maybe refined sugar at some point in the future, they'll say, well, it really is medicinal for certain purposes. Of course, we know that it can cause all sorts of problems. I like to think that medicine should be based first and foremost on the concept of evolution. So if we look at human anthropology specifically, we see the conditions under which humans evolved initially, or at least likely evolved. We can extrapolate that to what our bodies have developed to do. There's a reason why, for example, humans put a surplus value on sugary things. Initially, those sugary grains and so forth would have been the best, most compact, easily accessible caloric source. Of course, the minerals and stuff they were eating roots and tubers and nuts and small game and fish and things like that. Now, but the raw caloric count that they needed to keep up their lifestyle of walking around 20 miles a day, of course, sugary grains, staple grains, the early sorghum and what's it called, a teosinte, things of that nature. Papyrus, arguably. Certainly if there was any in the region, the shoots are quite sugary, cane and so forth. Certain ground roots, that did you know, by the way, that most sugar in the world comes from beetroot? It comes from sugar beets. It doesn't come from cane sugar anymore, or from any similar source. Very interesting. They would have been munching on some bamboo, and they invented fire, and the rest was history, literally speaking. And then razor fist people who believe that you need to overcook the steak, they ended up prevailing in society over people that want it still dripping. I'm just joking. Anyway, what is considered modern medicine is only modern in its current era. 10 years later, 10 years before, it would be considered super modern. If you told me the kinds of medical technology that are available now when I was a little kid, it would have been like something like National Geographic would have seemed boring by comparison. If you look at medicine from 20 years prior, like if I had looked at medicine from, the 70s or something, it seems primitive. The look, even the aesthetic feel of the hospital has changed. 20 years before I was a kid, people were still smoking in the hospitals. Typically, a lot of surfaces were green or that weird, ugly 70s looking gray color that for some reason everyone loved. Things just didn't look as sophisticated. By the 90s, things are white and rounded, some bright colors splashed in the children's ward, of course. Computers start becoming much, much more common. The old analog systems fall by the wayside. Fast forward to now, it's unrecognizable. Even computers, technology has marched forward so much. most of the predictions within medicine, technically speaking, are transitory. So when I look back through old herbal guides and I see chew this root to prevent rabies, I say that has basically as much medical legitimacy as probably about 90 to 95% of what people consider modern medicine today, within the theoretical context. Now, there's always one aside. If you go into modern microscopy and things of that nature, some things can be verified. We are capable of seeing a virus. We are capable of observing bacteria. We're capable of doing experiments and showing microevolution and things of this nature. Those things we can be objective on. Those things we know they're true insofar as biology and chemistry goes. We know if we mix certain chemicals with others, it creates a certain reaction. We can observe bacteria, the rate at which they die interacting with that chemical, and so forth. But there's always also the unforeseen. Nobody saw the idea of bacteria becoming resistant to sulfa drugs and then to more modern antibiotics. Nobody foresaw that coming. Then you get into the 90s and it becomes one of the greatest panics of society. Oh my God, staph is going to come back. Oh my God, we're all going to die. You're going to get leprosy and shit because we're not going to be able to treat it. Thankfully, in most cases, the worst case scenario didn't happen, but definitely that evolution was not something that was prior conceived of. This is why, with regards to climate science, which I won't be able to talk about for very much longer on a YouTube video, this is why I'm so skeptical of all of the arrangements that have been made to try to solve the problem. Well, we thought we had solved the problem of disease back in the 40s and 50s with the development of the early wave antimicrobial compounds we were using. We said, shit, you take a couple of pills, you're fine. Then we develop things that are much gentler on the system. You take a pill a day for a week, and it doesn't matter what disease you have. But then we get smacked in the ass by AIDS and by microbes that are resistant or in some cases outright immune to these particular compounds that we had developed. And then we go back to square one. I have a sneaking suspicion that if we start saturating the atmosphere with reflective titanium flakes or gases like Bill Gates wants to do, or build a giant reflection mirror around the world or something like that, we'll end up fucking ourselves harder. The same is true for medicine. When we take draconian steps, when we significantly change the natural way in which we deal with disease, what we do is we incentivize evolution. We've seen it before. My worry is that we're doing that again with a certain epidemic that shall not be named, and that we're actually incentivizing the evolution of something that's going to become our worst goddamn nightmare in the next few years because we refuse to allow it to do what we do with every other cold-like and flu-like disease and take its course and achieve equilibrium, thus ensuring that its long-term evolution tends to favor more transmissible and seasonal, but less deadly. But we're not doing that, are we? We're doing the opposite of that. We're trying to get it to evolve in the other direction. I'm sure the Chinese that developed it as a bioweapon to kill off all the old and sick people are really hoping that they're successful at upping the death rate to 5 to 10% for those demographics. I think you have to be like 85 to be there at the moment. Oh, what if it was people 65 and over? You know, they're getting close to pensioner's age, right? And you're communist. You don't care about human life. Just something to think about. That's about all. Peace out.